While modding my new upcoming Skyrim Let's Roleplay, I started wondering about the differences between the Elder Scrolls games, at least the ones that I've played. I haven't played the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, but I did start with Morrowind. But I think today only a small minority have played any Bethesda game before Morrowind. What is advanced between the games? Let's take Morrowind as the basic open-world template game back in 2002 when it launched, even though these open worlds were in their infancy at the time. Morrowind will be the longest part of the three since this is where the basics of the Bethesda RPGs are all laid out. You are the Nerevarine, a reincarnated hero of old that has come back to right the wrongs of others from thousands of years ago. The Tribunal, which is their main religion, is a false one, and the three living gods in Morrowind got their powers by deception and lies. And they are losing their powers due to something that happened hundreds of years ago in the last era. This all takes place at near the end of the Third Era of Tamriel, when the Third Empire was at its strongest. We play in the province of Morrowind under that empire. It is a land of the Dark Elves, or the Dunmer. Those with ashen skin and red eyes, and all kinds of colored hair, mostly black, with some white and red hair thrown in there too. In each one of the games, you start as a prisoner for whatever role-playing reason that you, as the player, can come up with. We also go to the capital of Morrowind, which is Mournhold in the game's first expansion, and then to the island of Solstheim, which was part of Skyrim back then in the Third Era, and that is in the game's second expansion. But before the two game expansions, it's all in the large island of Vardenfell, which is in the north center of Morrowind. The game is in 3D, and some parts of it are quite nice to look at. The characters needed a lot of work though, and this is something that I believe Bethesda has always lagged behind. They looked to me like they were walking on stilts and their faces were done terribly, even for 2002, since I remember this quite clearly at the time. Just about everything in Morrowind is stat-based. Let's take walking and running, the only way to move your character around besides the various teleports and maybe levitation, which is a sort of floating walk. Walk is slow, but run required fatigue, or in Skyrim it's called stamina, and your fatigue would drain as what I always considered walking since it wasn't too fast of a run, more like a fast walk. It was all dependent upon several different attributes: strength, endurance, agility, and willpower. In Morrowind, of the three bars, red is health, blue is magicka, and green is fatigue, and this pretty much goes for all the Elder Scrolls games. In Morrowind, only fatigue regenerates on its own, and only when you stand still. To increase it faster, like with health and magicka, you need to drink potions, eat food, or rest. Now, I don't remember it clearly, but it's been 20 years, and my Morrowind Let's Roleplay has been overhauled with all the mods to make a game that looks much different, but I recall that when your fatigue ran out from running, you could still run, but then you'd be in trouble if you got into combat, which requires fatigue. In my Morrowind Let's Roleplay, I added in a mod, or it was part of a comprehensive mod that added the ability for fatigue to regenerate even when you run, so I didn't have to deal with this annoying issue. I also added in magicka regeneration with the mod, just to make it a little less micromanagement. For me, the story takes center stage, and if I can remove some of the small annoying mechanics, then so be it. To even hit an enemy required a stat roll, so it wasn't an automatic hit, which I think always surprises people, even back then when playing an Elder Scrolls game for the first time. What? My sword is hitting them right in the center, but nothing is happening? I do have to give Morrowind one thing. The music was pretty great, and you're listening to it right now. The exploration ones are pretty good. The theme song for the game was pretty memorable, and when I hear it to this day, nostalgia kicks in. For me, it was my first open-world game, and exploration was a lot of fun. I really didn't have much to compare it to back then, I just know I really liked it. Which is sort of funny because I remember someone in one of my old MMO guilds, considering it was 2002, it was probably Dark Age of Camelot, told me to check out Morrowind because it was the best RPG ever. So I gave it a look, and I remember seeing a Dark Elf female, and I was thinking, what the heck is that? Yes, I know about Drow in the Forgotten Realms books, but for some reason I thought this Dark Elf from Morrowind looked weird. I don't even remember why I bought the game, other than I really liked RPGs back in the 90s, such as the first 2 Fallout games, and a few of the gold box games I played earlier in the 90s. I guess I gave it a chance after reading the review. I had a blast exploring and doing what I wanted in Morrowind. It was probably the first time I ever played a video game with such freedom. Though to be honest, the game got pretty dull in terms of a challenge after around level 20. In my modded game I have up on my channel, I added in a mod to greatly power up all of the bad guys who were meant to be challenges, especially the named ones. Dagoth-Ur was actually too powerful for me to defeat, even when Sunil Railvein was just about at his peak for the entire game. In the Heart Chamber, if you defeat Dagoth-Ur, he'll just come back and keep on fighting. But I couldn't even bring him down once in my modded game. Every hit he made on Sunil was about 1/3 of his life, and Sunil didn't have that many healing potions, as he hadn't really needed them for quite a while. I remember defeating Dagoth-Ur in my original playthrough, and it was really easy. But he keeps on coming back, considering he is basically a god because of his connection to Lorkhan's heart. I even made an old mod for some RPG website way back then to boost his difficulty. I have no idea what website it was or what happened to that mod, but I did put it out there on the internet. But for its time, Morrowind was a pretty fantastic experience, and I don't just mean the mechanics of the game, but the lore was so rich. It felt like an actual living, breathing world with its own history that logically fit together in a way that made sense. And I think that is the greatest legacy of Morrowind, its lore, and how finally all the rot, lies, and propaganda of the Tribunal was brought down by the player in the end. To navigate, they provided the player with a detailed paper map of the game world, and I do mean detailed since the minimap in the game that you use was very basic and only highlighted the settlements and landmass. Through the original paper map, I could literally see where a lot of the caves are, and through that, you can choose to visit them. The expansions came with their own maps, and the Game of the Year edition with both expansions and the original game came with one for the base game and the 2 expansions all in one seen here. So let's get into how the game was for a living, breathing world. How much interactivity was there between the player and this world? Well, the game was very static. Nothing really seemed to change but the story you read as you play through it. NPCs either stood there or walked around aimlessly, just to give it an illusion of life. Sounds for a lot of things were missing too. I had to add them into my game through mods. City sounds, wind, birds, and wildlife. In the end, when you looked at what it didn't have, it felt quite stale. Yes, there was rain, the sound of water if you were nearby, and ash storms in the base game. But when this wasn't happening, all you heard were your footsteps and the game's music. There was no breeze or even a slight wind. One of the game's official plugins added sounds to the western coast of Vardenfell. It was called the Bitter Coast Sounds, and it added ambient noise such as frogs croaking and dragonflies. But this was limited to only one section of the island. On the whole, I found that there is very little actual interactivity between the player and the game other than combat, buying, and selling. When you speak to someone, you are presented with a wall of text to read in most cases, and you just pick a topic for the NPC to respond to. Typically, once you'd ask the question once, it's always the same, but in some rare cases you could get a different response from other NPCs. Rarely was there actual voice acting in the game from NPCs apart from the beginning and the ending of the base game, and the same with the game's expansions, though each race was given a set of things to say if you walk near them, or if you get into combat with them. Though exceptions do exist, and I will always remember that Dunmer Ashlander outside of the Ghost Gate that said to me, "Thank you," after I cured him of disease. You use your speechcraft skill to get people to like you, or in the beginning hate you until you improve the skill enough to get them to start liking you. Your mercantile skill allowed you to get better prices, which slowly improves as you buy and sell items throughout the game, though prices were also dependent upon the merchant liking you. Your equipment can get damaged from use, such as your armor and weapons, so you needed a repair hammer to repair them or they would have reduced effectiveness, and even be useless and fall into your inventory if they are reduced to 0. All skills in the game are usually increased through use, which means that if you want to become a great mage, you need to cast a lot of spells and whatever mage skill you would like to increase. If you want to use fire to eliminate your enemies, well, you better use destruction spells a lot to increase your destruction skill. Same with all the other skills in the game. Points are not given upon leveling up to distribute to a skill you have not or hardly used. It's all based on how often you use that skill. Skills can also be increased through training, but this requires a fair bit of gold, takes in-game time, and it all depends on the skill level of your trainer. If you reach their skill level, then they can no longer train you. You'll have to seek out masters in the game world to train up to maximum. And don't forget books. Books can also increase your skills. There is a list of classes to choose from when starting the game, and though they are interesting, I never actually once chose any of these since they allow you to create your own. You get to tag your 2 favorite attributes when making a custom class, and this increases those attributes permanently. My character Sunil Rilvain was an underworld enforcer since he had worked for the Thieves Guild, not as a thief but as hired muscle. He also was the enforcer for people that owed his loan shark business gold. That and had been a for-hire bodyguard at various times. Taken from the Elder Scrolls Wiki, there are a total of 27 skills available in Morrowind. Each character class has 5 major skills, 5 minor skills, and the remainder 17 count as miscellaneous skills. Raising a skill will allow for an increase in the paired attribute as each level is obtained. Skills are divided into 3 specializations: combat, magic, and stealth. During the character creation process, it is possible to choose one of the 3 categories of specialization: combat, magic, or stealth. Characters receive +5 to all skills of their specialization, which is applied to the starting skill level. All skills which fall under the specialization will also be easier to increase. In Morrowind, if a skill is listed as major, minor, or miscellaneous, they will play a role in how fast a character level is gained and how much an attribute can increase. Only by raising skills in the major and minor section can a level be gained. Each time 10 skill points are gained in any of the major or minor skills, a message to rest will appear. Once the player rests, a level up menu will appear with the ability to select which attributes to raise. Only 3 attributes per level may be raised. If a skill is designated miscellaneous, then its advancement will not count towards level progression. During character creation, which section a skill is placed in will also partly determine the starting skill level. Major skills start at 30, minor skills start at 15, and miscellaneous skills start at 5, not including racial bonuses and specialization. Major skills increase faster than minor skills, and minor skills increase faster than miscellaneous. Skills can be raised to a maximum level of 100. It is possible to temporarily exceed this cap through the use of enchanted items and potions. The higher the level, the greater the effect the skill has. In Morrowind, skill progression involves the active use of a particular skill. Each time a skill is used successfully, the skill's progression will raise a percentage. Once that reaches 100%, the skill will increase 1 point. The percentage increase is dependent on 2 factors: the skill's specialization, and if it is a major or minor skill. Going to jail may lower skills, even if they are 100, and they may be raised again afterwards through the previously listed means. Skills may be temporarily raised above 100 with the use of constant effect items that increase the skill as long as they are equipped, casting a fortify spell, drinking a fortify potion. It is possible to drink multiple potions in a row to raise a skill to 1000. Also, as I said, you can increase your skills from reading books. This is always just 1 skill increase, and it happens just once per book. Most books do not increase a skill. When you rest to level up, you choose what attributes to add points to, and all of this is based upon the skills you've gained since the last level. Each skill is tied to an attribute, so if you want to increase your strength, then you need to use skills that are affected by that attribute. The maximum attribute increase is 5 per level. So you would need 5 skills that are affected by that attribute to max it out to 5 for a 1 level increase. Yes, this can be gamed, but with how little challenges in the game past a certain point, I never felt it was worth bothering with. There are 10 races to choose to be for your character in the game, each with a list of bonuses and or even the opposite in every skill. Previous Elder Scrolls games only allowed you to choose one of 8 races, with Imperials and Orcs excluded until Morrowind. Don't forget birth signs. Birth signs are what constellation your character is born under. You choose from one of 13 of them, and they give you bonuses, or a bonus and a curse at the same time. Several of them grant you abilities to use once per day as well. Merchants had a limited amount of gold, and you had to find merchants with the most gold to buy those expensive things from you when you started finding them. Everyone who knows Morrowind knows about the talking mud crab merchant with the most gold in the game, 10,000. Oddly, a lot of the expensive equipment was worth way more than you could ever get for it. I remember some Daedra weapons being worth between 20 to 50,000, but you could never get anywhere near that amount for them. Alchemy was another skill for the player, and it provided a way to interact with the world. This is how you create the classic health potion. You gather ingredients for alchemy from flowers and plants, which didn't change the graphics of the plant, by the way. It was just no longer lootable. You can also buy food or pick from farmers' fields and use these in alchemy, and from all of these ingredients you can make potions. The higher your skill, the better the potion, though you need to carry around the alchemical equipment to make them. You can create your own custom spells at your local mage guild. Spellmakers are NPCs who can make custom magic spells for you from your known spell effects. The ability to make custom spells is important to any player using a magically inclined character. Up to 8 effects can be combined into a single potent spell. Spells can be tweaked to provide maximum effect for minimal cost, though you will need a lot of intelligence and or equipment that enhances your magicka number to cast the more powerful spells that you create. You loot items from bodies, usually ones you've killed, and can pick up the occasional thing on the ground, or on furniture, or in furniture or chests, locked or not. There are many locked doors and chests in the game. You either need the exact key for that lock, or you can try to pick them with lockpicks. This is part of the security skill. At first it can be a little frustrating if you come across something that's a little higher than your current skill, but as with all things, patience is a virtue. Eventually, you will get it. As there are different levels of locks, there are different quality lockpicks. Obviously, the higher quality, the better, but if you get a few of them at the beginning of the game, I'd save them until you get a little better, otherwise you'll be wasting them on low-level locks with your low-level skill, and they are too expensive to just buy more. Some locks cannot be picked and require a special quest key to open them. This is a theme throughout the Elder Scrolls games. There are traps, and you have to use probes to look for them, and based upon your security skill, you'll find them or not find them. Again, there are different quality probes. I happen to remember that there was an aura around trapdoors or chests if you detected them, but I had modded this out of my Morrowind Let's Roleplay for greater realism. Unfortunately, I could not find a picture of the old aura I remember from 20 years ago online anywhere, but I do see pictures of people who have detected traps. But there was no actual trap you could see, it just says you've detected a trap at whatever level. Don't use a probe to remove it, open it, and you can get paralyzed or poisoned, or get hit with some other form of nasty spell. You could enchant items. You can do it yourself or go and pay to get it done, and depending on how much gold and the strength of the soul gem you had, you can make the enchantment stronger. You can enchant them yourself, but that is actually something I didn't even know you could do until my Let's Roleplay with Snail Rilvain on my YouTube channel. But in his case, it made sense to pay for it, as he wasn't a skilled mage. I like the fact that you can name that equipment that you're enchanting, and it will carry that name for the rest of the game. I'm not sure about Daggerfall and Arena, but as for levitation, Morrowind was the only Elder Scrolls game that I have played that has it in it. It's a really handy spell that allows one to basically walk upwards so you can get into places you wouldn't normally be able to. I guess it's a little difficult to plan around someone always being able to go over your walls or up to the top of the tower without going through the stairwell, so they decided after Morrowind that the levitation spell will no longer be part of the Elder Scrolls games. I love the lore they used to justify its removal. The Levitation Act is a law passed throughout the Third Empire in Third Era 421 that banned the use of levitation magic. The province of Morrowind is not subject to the law because, although it is part of the Empire, the native Dunmer retained autonomy and house traditions. As such, levitation magic was prevalent in Morrowind and Vardenfell in the late Third Era. Unfortunately, the old engine used for Morrowind did not have a really long line of sight, or I suppose you would see the glaring obvious. There was no real red mountain, more like a red hill, and the red hill was only seen when you were basically there. I have no idea how this modder was able to see half of Vardenfell, but they must have really tweaked the game to see this far. You can even see Solstheim in the northwest. This is how the real red mountain should look, which is said to dominate not only Vardenfell, but most of Morrowind because it's so enormous. It's the largest volcano on Tamriel, and it's responsible for thousands of years at least of ash being dumped on the island. After Red Mountain erupted in the Fourth Era, Vardenfell was uninhabitable. Depending on what faction you choose, of which there are 3 in the game, Redoran, Hlaalu, and Telvanni, you can get your very own home built, which came in stages. These would require quests to complete, along with a number of days to pass until your home was finally constructed. There is teleporting around to get to places faster. It's Morrowind's version of fast travel, which is very helpful in this game, since your run speed is not too fast. Here you see Sunel using a Silt Strider to take him to Vivec. As you can see, time passes when you use them. Using Mark and Recall spells, Mage's Guild teleportation, and the Master Index, which was one of the plugins to take you to all the old fort ruins around Vardenfell, could really speed up travel. The most common fast travel was using the services of a Silt Strider, which was around nearly every town or village, and in certain places, boats and gondolas. You could become a vampire in the base game, or a werewolf with the Blood Moon expansion. Though I didn't dabble with these very much at all. For RP reasons, it's hard to justify becoming a man-eating beast and leaving it at that for my ending. That would be a pretty dark final video. You could summon a Daedra or undead to help you in combat, but for nearly the entire game you are alone. There is one quest that I can think of where an NPC actually comes along with you to help for just that quest, but other than a few escort quests and maybe the official plugin The Siege of Firemoth, you are solo. Yes, for my Let's Roleplay I use the Julan mod, which comes with 2 NPCs that can become your companions for the rest of the game. There were a variety of creatures depending on what areas you were in. The different sections of Vardenfell were completely different from Mournhold and Solstheim in the 2 expansions. Everyone that played through the game will remember the Cliff Racers, those flying, leathery creatures that sometimes took their time getting to you and often weren't alone. Go into the water and slaughterfish will bite you. Go off the paths and the Nyxhounds and Cliff Racers will attack you. Oftentimes on the path too. And there are several other hostile creatures in the game. There is a variety of areas of Vardenfell. Swamps along the west coast, farms and hills along the central south where it's most populated, islands dot the north coast, grasslands dominate the northeastern coast, and the ashlands are in the center and the northern part of the island. No, I'm not really going to get into the various human-like faction enemies you find in the game. Mostly they are bandits, ashlanders, smugglers, assassins, Nords, etc. And yes, the antagonist of the story, Dagoth and his minions. In the end, there were not many choices to make in the game. There are a lot of factions to join within the game, 15 in total, but several of these are part of the main quest in the base game or the expansions. The only real choice is which of the main Dunmer houses to join, Hlaalu, Redoran, or Telvanni. Each of them have their own lore and style, but in the end it comes down to personal choice, as none of them affect the end game. It's just more like which unique faction you'd like to become a part of while still going to the same ending. I suppose the other choice for the factions would be to join them or not. There's the Fighters, Mages, and Thieves Guild, the Morag Tong, which is the Guild of Assassins, and the Tribunal, which is the religion of Morrowind. There is also the Imperial Legion, the Imperial Cult, and the choice of becoming a vampire and joining one of the 3 clans. Basically, it's just another set of quests per each, and in the end, you get to take over as the new guild leader. There is a couple of quests that will exclude you from the Thieves Guild if you take them, but if you do it in the right order, as I did in my Let's Roleplay, you shouldn't have a problem. Just do some research beforehand. So in the end, the optional factions to join are just giving you more work around Vvardenfell, but then these are really only side quests. Still, they do add a lot to the game lore as you discover what influence and help, or not, these factions are doing on Vvardenfell. And I wouldn't want to just join one of the 3 houses and that would be it, as you'd miss out on quite a lot. However, since I just played the game to its completion from the spring of 2020 to the spring of 2021, I have had to do over most of the quests from the game, and in the end I can say one thing. The majority of quests in the game were kill or fetch quests, and ultimately felt very shallow. There are several quests that were more than that, but these were uncommon. I think the lore, style, and theme of the game has colored people's perception of what the game was like since it came out. Which in a way is a good thing for its legacy, but when it comes to little choice in the game of who to join or who not to join, nostalgia for me was little recompense for going through it all again. There weren't really many meaningful choices in this game. Each faction and the main quests were more like a bus tour. You have no choice as to what route or ending the bus will take, but in this case, you do all the work to get there by killing, fetching, and traveling. However, even on top of that, the rich culture shown and the long history there to discover as you progress through the game overshadows much of the game's shortcomings. The Telvanni Mages faction has giant mushroom buildings. The Redoran faction uses old scarab and crab shells for their buildings. And the Hlaalu use adobe-type architecture for theirs. Vivec City, named after one of the Tribunal gods, is the capital city of Vvardenfell, and Mournhold, which is the capital of the entire Morrowind province, are quite beautifully rendered and culturally distinct. In Vivec, you have several different cantons which represent either one of the main factions, or several for ones such as Saints and the High Fane, which is the furthest south canton and is the center of the Tribunal religion. It all takes hours for one to explore, but it is quite worth it in the end. They even have gondola rides to take you through the different sections of Vivec. For a 2002 game, this is quite impressive. In Mournhold, you see one of the prettiest and wealthiest cities one could imagine in a setting like this, with a majestic and beautiful temple where one of the Tribunal gods exists to interact with the people. Let's not leave out the arboreal forests, snow, and ice of Solstheim, as much as Sunil Rilvain probably wished he never bothered going to. The island is dotted with many old Dwemer ruins, which are the old disappeared Mer, or dwarves, from thousands of years before, back in the First Era. This has a center point to the main story, as you would see as you get through to the end. It was the Dwemer that unearthed Lorkhan's heart, and it was they who originally tried to become gods, and in the end they made their entire race on Nirn disappear. In most of these old Dwemer ruins, one can still find their guardians, the Amunculi. Yes, that's a funny name, and I didn't even know that until I looked it up in the wiki, but apparently they're all called the Amunculi. Animunculi. They are ancient mechanical automatons that may be found patrolling the many abandoned Dwemer ruins encountered throughout Tamriel. In the end, one has to conclude that Morrowind has a very rich history and culture, and if one bothers to read the books, do all the quests, and think about what they are involved with in the game, especially with the conclusion of the main quest for the base game and for Tribunal, you'll be left feeling impressed by the world you just spent tens of hours interacting with. The game had 2 paid-for expansions and 8 official plugins, which were free downloads. Now we move on to Oblivion. I was recently laying awake one night while in bed, and I was thinking about the actual differences between Oblivion and Morrowind in terms of what game enhancements were made for Oblivion. Since then and now, I figured it out. Seems to me that Oblivion focused more on enhancing existing game mechanics rather than adding in new ones. So it's 2006, and now we are in the province of Cyrodiil, and later in the Shivering Isles with the game's only expansion in 2007. The game has a total of 10 listed plugins, with the Shivering Isles being one of them for some reason. But as far as I'm concerned, there were 9 DLCs and 1 expansion. This time, none of the plugins were free. And this is what most people point at as the start of the well-loved paid-for content. Downloadable content, or DLC for short, with the infamous horse armor. It is the very end of the Third Era, and the Empire, well, at least before that fateful day of the Emperor using your prison cell to escape the Imperial City, was at its peak under one of the best emperors in its history. You are the hero of Kvatch after you drive the Daedra out of the destroyed city, but during the course of the game you are also named as the champion of Cyrodiil, and in the Shivering Isles expansion you are named as the new mad god, Sheogorath. Other than graphics and animation, which were very improved over Morrowind, especially the animation part, there were actual forests, fallen down trees, and grass, as well as non-hostile deer that looked good especially for the time, who also ran from you when you got near. Yes, there were scribs and Quama workers, and Netch, those floating alien-like creatures. These were the non-hostile wild animals in Morrowind. But all the other things won you dead as soon as you came within their aggro range, and none of them ever ran from you when you got close, not even the non-aggroing ones. Well, maybe not much has changed here in Oblivion, since all those creatures are not in Cyrodiil, because now all you have are deer, and everything else still wants to kill you. At least the dreaded cliff racers are no longer around to harass you anymore. I think the largest of all game mechanic improvements was to give the NPCs an actual daily schedule to make the world feel more alive. Not the bandits, other enemy NPCs, or monsters of course, but the people who lived in the villages and cities. Or just a farmer living on their own, or that tavern keeper who runs an inn out in the middle of nowhere. The official name for this is Radiant AI, and in my opinion was probably the single most needed improvement over Morrowind. They sleep, get up and eat and do their daily work, walk around and talk to each other, and then come home and sleep again. They have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner schedule as well. At the end of the day, they may wander around their home for an hour or two before finally going to sleep in their bed. For me, this added a lot to the game and made it feel all the more believable. Though again, the character graphics were still really awful, and making your character look just acceptable was an art form all on its own. It went from bad art to what I would describe as bizarre bad art. I guess it was an improvement over the Morrowind faces, but by how much is up to the individual. However, despite how characters may look, the character creation was another improvement over Morrowind. This time you were able to shape your face, hair, and color instead of choosing from a set list of pre-made faces from the 2 sexes and 10 races. This is my completely modded Faces Let's Roleplay, where someone painstakingly went through every face model to change your character and the NPC's looks to make them all look much better. though I did find a few exceptions when I played through the game that brought me back to the old vanilla look. In Oblivion, you can buy homes instead of joining a faction and building it in stages. Each city had one you could buy. With each home, you could also furnish them, which was an extra cost on top of buying them. The DLC had several homes for you to get as well, but for my Oblivion Let's Roleplay, I used a mod that only unlocked those DLC homes for you if you had the prerequisite skills, such as Frostcrag Tower needing you to have mage's skills to a certain level, which to me only made logical sense. The DLC grants you a home for each of the 4 main guilds of the game: a fighters, mages, thieves home, and lastly the Vile Lair, a Dark Brotherhood vampire-like home. No, I've never seen it, I've just read about it. These come with little perks in each, such as being able to make your own spells or enchant for Frostcrag Spire, and having a garden along with teleport pads to all the cities, or being able to cure vampirism, disease, and heal. There is also a dark minion whom the hero may employ to find gold in a most unseemly manner, it's described, and a cattle pen for vampires to dine in the Vile Lair. You can use your mouse or whatever button on your controller to block with a shield this time around, because in Morrowind was based upon your skill and random chance, and your only choice with the shield was to put it in your left hand or not. In this game, you cannot become a werewolf, but you can become a vampire, as my character Malcolm Montrose found out the hard way. Stealth has been given a complete overhaul, and it uses light this time around, so it's not basing it all upon your sneak skill. Sticking to the shadows, using light footwear, or nothing at all until journeyman level, and making sure no one is facing you are all important. You cannot pay an NPC for enchanting to be done this time around, you have to do it yourself, at an altar of enchanting, and the skill has been removed. Now it's all dependent on what spells you know, and the size of the soul you have in your soul gem. While running around Oblivion, it's no longer taxing upon your fatigue, so that for me, and I'm sure many others, is a nice improvement. This time around, Magicka and Fatigue regenerate on its own based upon your requisite attribute level. When talking to someone, you are no longer given a wall of speech and choices on which to bring up. Instead, time freezes and you zoom in on the person you are talking to. There, you are usually given a couple of things to talk about, though in nearly every case you can choose rumors, which I sort of made into a bit of a theme in Oblivion. Heard any good rumors lately? Speechcraft is different this time around. It's its own minigame, where you try and get them to like you. Some may like it more than the simple way it was done in Morrowind. I do. You try and match the wheel up with what the NPC likes, and they always like, love, dislike, and hate one of the 4 quarters of the wheel, and you need to match it up best to get a good outcome with each of the levels of the random wheel you are given. Haggle in the game for better prices is now a setting for buying and selling per person when you go to buy and sell with a merchant, and whether they like you and in comparison their mercantile skill versus yours is how the prices are now worked out. Merchants now have unlimited gold, but a limited amount of gold to buy per item. This is boosted through speechcraft and your mercantile skill, though you still run into the maximum gold that they have for purchasing each item. At expert rank, you can invest 500 more gold in that merchant, so they will then purchase your items for a maximum of that amount more. Hit master rank, and every merchant has an additional 500 more gold on top of everything. So if a merchant buys for a maximum of 1,000 gold per item, you can invest 500 more at mercantile expert rank, so then they will then buy for 1,500 gold. At master rank, they, with the investment, will then buy for 2,000 gold. All 10 races are back in the game naturally, and each one has their bonuses or the opposite in every skill. These pictures are from the excellent mod Oblivion Character Overhaul version 2. Don't play the game without it. Classes are back, of course, though they have changed somewhat. Again, as Malcolm Montrose, I chose to create my own personal class with tagging the 7 major skills. You cannot level up without an advancement in one of these chosen skills, just like in Morrowind. There are 7 major skills this time, unlike the 5 major and 5 minor skills in Morrowind. I created a custom class again called the Knight Battle Mage, which fits my character's backstory and race. Along with that, I tagged my 2 favorite attributes to permanently increase them. You need to sleep to gain your level again as well. Once you do, you level up and can improve your attributes here based upon the skills you've gained and what attribute they are affected by. Birth signs are back in the game, and as far as I know, they are pretty much the same as in Morrowind. I chose the Apprentice birth sign, which gives you a 100-point Magicka bonus, but you also get a 100% weakness to Magicka. Considering my Oblivion character Malcolm was a Breton, with an innate magical resistance of 50%, and 50 more Magicka points, it all added up to create quite the good mage. He just had to worry about other magical attacks against him until his health and or magical resistance equipment compensated for it, which it did probably about midway through my Let's Roleplay. So the hero chooses 7 major skills, and the remaining skills are made minor skills. Each skill is governed by an attribute. There are 3 main categories of skills: combat arts, magic arts, and stealth arts. Major skills are skills for which have been selected upon character creation for the hero to focus in. 7 skills can be chosen of the available 21, and the rest will be minor skills. Major skills will start at 25 instead of 5, and for every 10 major skill increases, the hero will gain a character level. Major skill increases faster than minor skills. Also, they will increase even faster by which specialization the skill is under. Minor skills are skills that are not selected as a major skill at character creation and improve at a reduced rate. Minor skills do not contribute to the total amount of skill increases needed for leveling, though they do count towards attribute multipliers when leveling, just like in Morrowind. Now all skills are put into ranks. The ranks are Novice, 0 to 24. I don't even think you can get to 0. Well, I've never seen it. Maybe if you go to jail. Apprentice, 25 to 49. Journeyman, 50 to 74, Expert, 75 to 99, and Master, 100. I think Malcolm only mastered 2 skills to 100, Conjuration and Alchemy, by the end of the game. In general, throughout Oblivion, depending on your rank, they give you bonuses, such as when you reach Master rank and Repair. You no longer use up hammers and can just safely keep the one on you to repair everything. This goes with every skill in the game, and now when your skills hit the next new rank, the game stops and you are given a paragraph to read about your new rank in a skill and what bonuses you are now able to use. Favorited items can also be bound to the number keys. This can be done by opening the Favorites menu and pressing a number key. The selected favorite can then be quickly equipped by pressing the number key that the item spell is bound to. Favorites is a hotkey type of interface that allows you to quickly switch between weapons and magic that you like to commonly use, but don't want to go into your inventory to select them every time you want to use them. This is present in all 3 games in this video, though calling it favorite is a Skyrim term. I believe it's just referred to as hotkeys or hotkeying for Morrowind and Oblivion. I think another major change in the game is that if you were within range and your aim was correct, you'd always hit the enemy. That was a very needed change from Morrowind. Along with your melee skill rank and combat art, you now have access to power attacks and moves depending on your rank level for whatever blade, blunt, and hand-to-hand you use. Such as in my Let's Roleplay, Malcolm used blunt, which was the same for axes by the way. But it worked like this. At Novice rank, you had your basic attack and power attack if you held down the mouse button. At Apprentice rank, you get a damage bonus for standing power attack. At Journeyman, you get left and right power attacks, with a chance to disarm. At Expert, you get a backwards power attack with a chance to knock down. At Master level, you get a forward power attack with a chance to paralyze. A similar system is in place for marksmanship, though there was no power attack, but you get combat bonuses at different ranks, with Master rank granting you a chance to paralyze. Security, or lockpicking, is all about lockpicking this time. They created an entire new minigame for the player to succeed or fail at. Though the one in Morrowind was simple compared to moving the flimsy lockpick to push the tumblers up in the lock, I personally never got the hang of Oblivion's lockpicking and always just used the auto attempt. I kind of liked the way it was in Morrowind, but I agreed that there should be some logical minigame for it, but for me, Oblivion's version wasn't it. This time there is only a lockpick, there are not different quality levels of them. Unless, of course, you get the Daedric artifact, the skeleton key. Then lockpicking is beyond simple and you'll never fail again. Traps were taken out of the security skills, so no more probes. This time they were external threats in the game world that you had to get past. Some were traps on the floor to trip, some were trip wires. There were spiked floor traps, crushing wall traps, gas traps, etc. It was a massive change from Morrowind, and really added to the realism and immersiveness compared to using probes on doors and chests to see if a trap was there. Now you have to use your eyes. If you run through a dungeon, you can end up falling through a hole in the floor that you didn't see until the last second, which happened to my character Malcolm. Not a trap, but now there are ways to open secret places that you might not otherwise see, such as a floor panel that opens a secret door, or a switch, or a button. These kinds of things I've always found interesting in RPGs. Just don't make the switch too difficult to find, and we are good. Gone is the wall of text like when you talk to someone in Morrowind. The entire game of Oblivion now uses voice actors for all the lines that are said by NPCs. This, for me, along with the NPC daily schedule, or Radiant AI, is the greatest improvement they made for the game to make it feel more lifelike, other than the improved graphics and animation, that is. However, there is a limited number of voices used in the game, and once you hear one race/sex speak, it will be the same for all the races and sexes, and worse, they like to use one voice actor for two races. Male Nords and Orcs use the same voice as it is for female Nords and Orcs. I hope you liked Wonder Woman from the 70s. Khajiit and Argonian are the same, yet oddly it seems that they use the same female voice for Breton and Imperial voices, which at times makes it difficult to tell apart Breton and Imperial females. Every other race, along with the gender split, uses their own voice. There are exceptions to a few characters, such as Emperor Uriel VII at the beginning of the game, Martin, who becomes the Emperor later on, Mankar Cameron, the leader of the Mythic Dawn, and Haskell, who is the right hand of Sheogorath. I think there maybe were a few other unique voice actors throughout the game that I missed, particularly in the Shivering Isles expansion. On top of a daily schedule and a fully voiced game now, the NPCs get together and talk. Though neat on paper, and sometimes is pulled off alright in-game, overall, for me, it was more humorous than something that felt real. There was a lot of repetition, and a lot of nonsensical replies from the initial greetings.
They say that King Helseth has made an alliance with House Dress. Together they pick apart the carcass of ruined Indoril.
Morrowind has always been a troubling place. It seems it is more so now.
Good day.
Morning.
Any new books you've been reading?
I read The Real Baron's Aya recently. Quite a piece of work.
I believe I read that some time ago. I'll have to give it another read.
Take care.
Goodbye.
I don't know you, and I don't care to know you. I don't know you, and I don't care to know you.
Obviously that last one is a joke, but it did turn into a big meme on the internet, especially on YouTube. This time they added in the horse, if you haven't seen it already, for you to travel around on, and I love that addition. Different horse types sold at different cities had different abilities. I think there was about 5 different ones in total. The black was the fastest, while the white was the toughest. And the painted one was the slowest and weakest, you know, the one you get it for free. Mages Guild had their teleport pads to other Mages Guild teleport pads, which, though neat, wasn't really necessary unless you either had the willpower to not fast travel or used a mod like I did to disable it just for role-playing reasons. Yes, fast travel. They added the ability to fast travel to any place you have visited before. Open your map, click on a place, and you'll go there. However, as I said, I turned off that ability in my Let's Roleplay of Oblivion through a mod. Yes, either I teleported, used my horse, or, as it was in the Shivering Isles, ran all over the place. For sanity and logical reasons, as Malcolm was a mage, I used a mod to give me a Stone of Recall to Frostcrag Spire, which thankfully had a teleport pad to every city in the game to speed up my travel. So, unless I was in the Shivering Isles, any city I wanted to go to was just a click of my stone away, and then running to the teleport pads to choose which city I wanted to go to. Oddly, using the teleport pad in Frostcrag Spire did not teleport my horse to that city, but using the Mages Guild teleport pads did teleport my horse to that city's stable. This time there is a large detailed map in the game, and it shows every landmark and settlement. If you just start the game, only the cities show up there on the map, but as you visit each landmark and explore, these are now permanently on your game map. And you can also fast travel to them at any point, as long as you haven't it unmodded like I have. Along with a map of the province, there is now a local map, which displays areas you have been to, which can be very helpful in dungeons. Now let's talk about the addition of the compass in the user interface. It's in the very bottom in the center. It's a compass and much more. It now shows you what nearby landmarks there are, which includes everything on the map. Now, using the compass to show me where nearby places are that I haven't visited yet never bothered me, and in fact probably helped me to find a lot of places I otherwise never would have found, and this goes for every player out there. However, I do agree it does kill the immersion somewhat, as well as making exploration now something you look on the compass for as opposed to using your eyes to find the landmarks when out in the wilderness. I believe there is a mod to remove the compass, or at least some landmarks on the compass, which I didn't use with my Let's Roleplay, though I did use it to help me find places. I roleplayed around it as much as possible, as in my character used his eyes to find them. There are several mods up on the Nexus Mods website that removes the compass. Physics was added to the game this time. Bodies would ragdoll and roll downhill in a semi-realistic manner, but at least this was added, which in my opinion also greatly adds to the realism. You may have seen my companions so far in my Oblivion clips. Yes, I added in the Vilya and Fergus mods. Both good companions with their own backgrounds and stories, and for Oblivion, as far as I know, they are the most well-liked companion mods out there. This also greatly added to the fleshing out of my character's story and journey, as he couldn't have gotten as far as he did without them. Oblivion has no companion system of its own. Again, you are expected to go out on your own and adventure. No, escort quests do not count there. In Oblivion, your magicka and fatigue now regenerate. I don't even think it matters if you stand still for fatigue like in Morrowind. Now they regenerate even when moving around. The music was fine for the game with some memorable tracks, though nothing greatly stands out as spectacular. It is overall a good soundtrack in my opinion though. Now the main focus of the game is the invasion from Oblivion, though they don't quite get into too much detail other than it's from the Daedric Prince Mehrunes Dagon, and he has his hordes of Daedric coming through the gates all over Cyrodiil. Lore-wise though, Oblivion was many different realms, and Mehrunes Dagon's Oblivion realm of Deadlands was unique, though they also used that same look for Boethiah's realm in the game, and if one doesn't get to the end of the main story, one might get the impression that Oblivion is a place full of lava and jaggedly sharp buildings full of traps and Daedra. Even though they do show two other Oblivion realms that are quite different from each other, suffice to say I was one of those people before I dived into the lore back in 2019 and began learning all I could about the Elder Scrolls since I didn't finish Oblivion. Closing Oblivion gates is a lot of fun. When you get to the top of the tower, which is the end of that Oblivion Gate dungeon, you simply pick up the sigil, which closes it all, and sends you back to the world just outside the Oblivion Gate you used to enter. Though in truth, there are a lot of Oblivion gates in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and closing around a dozen felt like a lot of work to me. There is a pocket realm of Oblivion that is Mankar Cameron's personal realm, and it seems a bit like hell to me. The scenery and trees are beautiful, but everyone is being tortured over and over again, and no one can ever die. The Shivering Isles, which is the game's only expansion, was quite large, larger than it was in Blood Moon, considering it too was an island to explore. The Shivering Isles is the Mad God's realm of Sheogorath, who is quite the presence whenever you speak to him. He's pretty unforgettable. Lord Sheogorath?
Time. Time is an artificial construct. An arbitrary system based on the idea that events occur in a linear direction at all times. Always forward, never back. Is the concept of time correct? Is time relevant? It matters not. One way or another, I fear that our time has run out.
Interestingly, his realm has quite a few Daedra, but these aren't hostile to the player, unless you encounter one of the Hungers that live there. The Daedra, the Dark Seducers, and the Golden Saints are Sheogorath's guards and his army. Everyone else that is a citizen of his realm is a normal mortal like yourself, from Nirn. However, everyone who lives there is quite mad themselves. The realm is split into two halves, mania and dementia, and the people more or less conform to those two halves of madness depending on which side they live. In Oblivion, this time around, the fetch and kill quests are much more multi-layered. Oftentimes, one quest could take an hour or more of running around to complete. Think it's over after you kill a vampire you were set out to remove? Turns out it wasn't a vampire, and now you have to hunt down the real one who sent you there in the first place, who now has a cavern which will take quite a while to get to the end to meet him, since there are a lot of minions in the way. This is also a major improvement over Morrowind's quests, and I had to backtrack from near the end of this video to this point to add this in, as there is so much to point out for these three games that I had forgotten about it. It is a great improvement that really needs to be highlighted. There are fewer quests in the game overall, but they feel more meaningful, impactful, as well as memorable. Great job there, Bethesda. There are 5 guilds to join: the Fighters, Mages, and Thieves Guild. There is also the Dark Brotherhood, which is the Guild of Assassins, and there is the Arena. Really, the Arena is a sort of newish faction guild to join. You don't even have to join with them to fight and rise through the ranks. You can simply go in and bet on random matches. You bet on the blue or yellow team and watch like a real spectator. If you win, you double your gold you bet with. Always bet on blue though, always. Alchemy pretty much stayed the same from Morrowind, but I like that they added in a whole new ingredient that has no ties to anything in our world. This ingredient has several quests attached to it. Nirnroot. Again, you carry the alchemical equipment around with you and can brew potions at any time, though the trade-off is the weight of the equipment. Convenient, but not very realistic. The dungeon level design is much improved over Morrowind. Most dungeons have a shortcut out once you reach the end, and it helps instead of backtracking to the beginning. Lastly, I would like to talk about the lore and the setting. This is another area of contention. In fact, I would like to point this out as the largest drawback of Oblivion for many. The game has been likened to your typical medieval fantasy, with much of the architecture the same or similar to each other, along with medieval warriors and guards, with a sprinkling of Roman soldiers thrown in as the Imperial Legion. Generic, bland, and boring. But this is just the argument used for its aesthetics, not its lore, which, yes, I completely agree was really lacking compared to Morrowind, which I'll get into in a moment. Personally, I don't take issue with the game's aesthetics. I think it's all perfectly fine. The cities all look different from each other, as does the different sections of the land. Snow and mountains in Bruma, dry grasslands in Anvil, swampy marshlands in Leyawiin, or forests and hills around Coral and Shadenhall, the waterfront and lakes and river around the Imperial City and Breville, or the hills and endless fields with thousands of flowers around Skingrad. Each city has its own type of look. They're not the same. The different areas of the land aren't too drastically different from each other, as in there was no eternal winterlands or icebergs like in Skyrim, or deserts like what you might expect to see in Hammerfell, but the different areas of Cyrodiil were distinct from each other. The richest part of the lore in the game was by far the Ayleid ruins, and that is an old culture long gone by thousands of years, and they were the Cyrodiilic men's enemies who had subjugated them to horrific enslavement and unbelievable torture. There were some parts that covered the Cyrodiil's ancient culture, that being Sancretor, and with the DLC The Knights of the Nine, which harkened back to that first era when Saint Alessia, the first emperor of the First Cyrodiilic Empire, won a victory over the evil Ayleids, but there really wasn't too much more to it than that. I have seen this in someone else's channel video a few years ago, and I think this is the point where I came to greatly respect Morrowind for its lore and think less of Oblivion for its lore. In that video, this part of the pocket guide to the Empire was read to me, and it was the first time I heard the story. Rafage's famous declaration, "There is but one city in the Imperial Province, but one city in Tamriel, but one city in the world." That, my brothers, is the city of the Cyrodiils. From the shore, it is hard to tell what is city and what is palace, for it rises from the islands of the lake towards the sky in a stretch of gold. Whole neighborhoods rest on the jeweled bridges that connect the islands together. Gondolas and river ships sail along the watery avenues of its flooded lower dwellings. Moth priests walk by in a cloud of ancestors. House guards hold exceptionally long daikatanas crossed at intersections, adorned with ribbons and dragon flags, and the newly arrived Western Legionnaires sweat in the humid air. The river mouth is tainted red from the tin-mead soil of the shore, and river dragons rust their hides in its waters. Across the lake, the Imperial City continues, merging into the villages of the southern Red River and ruins left from the interregnum. The Emperor's Palace is a crown of sun rays surrounded by his magical gardens. One garden path is known as Green Emperor Road. Here, topiaries of the heads of past emperors have been shaped by sorcery and can speak. When one must advise Tiber Septim, birds are drawn to the hedgery head, using their songs as its voice and moving its branches for the needed expressions. One can make the argument that it was an engine limitation to how much they could actually add into the game, and I believe that to an extent. But the contrast between this brief description of the Imperial City and what you find in the game is like the difference between a beautifully furnished home and a home that has no furniture whatsoever. If they were able to add in so much lore and rich culture into Morrowind, then why was it so bare-boned in Oblivion? The description of the Imperial City there sounds like a place that I'd love to go and visit and explore. It sounds culturally rich with a unique heritage that anyone would want to go and experience. But as it turned out, just about none of that was in the game. However, I think some things could have been added. It was done in Morrowind, maybe it could have been done in Oblivion. However, I think the time between the games was too short. Was Oblivion rushed? The mechanics of the game, its graphics, physics, voiceovers, and animation are quite the step up from Morrowind, but when it comes down to it, that is where the focus of the game was made. Morrowind came out in 2002 and Oblivion in 2006. Skyrim was in 2011, with the expansion Blood Moon for Morrowind that was out in 2003. So in reality there wasn't that much time between Morrowind and Oblivion. Another year or two working on it might have brought us a game that hasn't been likened to a generic medieval fantasy game. I personally don't see it quite as a generic medieval fantasy game, but I do see it as somewhat lower and culturally shallow. It's a great story of the end of a centuries-old empire, the Third Empire of Cyrodiil, but the culture shown in the game was just something average needed to drive the story. It was a culture that could have been way, way more impressive, and this to me is the greatest weakness of Oblivion. But as you can see, there wasn't a great addition of new things, and I emphasize new things to the game mechanics. What they actually did was focus on enhancing existing game mechanics from Morrowind. And I believe that was quite necessary, actually. The addition of the horse was really nice, and I think everybody liked that, so that is one actual new mechanic added into the game, and there's some minor ones throughout that are new and weren't there in previous games. Overall, Oblivion throws out nearly all the game mechanics of Morrowind and focus on making them much better and in many ways more interactive. Though through personal experience and the talk in the modding community, Oblivion is a very unstable game. Add in a couple of mods and expect there to be crashes. This is what happened to me back in 2006 when the game came out. Every 20 minutes, just with a few mods, it would be crashing. Add in around 150 like I did for my Let's Roleplay, even though several of those mods were helpful stabilization mods, those things didn't exist back when I first started playing Oblivion, the game is going to give you trouble still. Compared to maybe a dozen crashes in my entire Let's Roleplay of Morrowind, I must have experienced over 500 in Oblivion. In the end, Oblivion is somewhat like Morrowind again, in which you don't get to make many choices in how the game's story plays out. It is, again, like being on that set bus tour, but it's your job to take that exact route to the end, which is unfortunate. Lastly, for Oblivion, yes, I know all about the level scaling issue, and though it was a bit of an issue for an unmodded Oblivion game, with mods that I used for my Let's Roleplay, I made sure that it wasn't an issue. It would take a whole video to go into understanding the level scaling problem, and I don't want to get into that. Suffice to say, it was a shortcoming design of the original game to always make sure the game was challenging for the player, which backfired and tended to make the game more difficult the more you leveled up. I believe it was overcompensation compared to what you dealt with in Morrowind, where the challenge evaporated around level 20, unless of course you turn the difficulty slider up. If you play Oblivion today, I believe it is essential to make sure you mod in something that removes the level scaling issue. Let's go to Skyrim now. This is a game that I have yet to have made a Let's Roleplay for, so I will use official clips from Bethesda as much as possible, and a lot of what I will say won't have clips to see from my game or pictures, because I haven't made them yet. The original reason I thought of the evolution of the games in terms of mechanics and interactivity was because of what I experienced after the opening scene of Skyrim, and everything you can go and do in Riverwood, which, by the way, happens to be the name of the street I live on. So in 2011, Skyrim came out, and this, I think, is the game that propelled Bethesda to superstardom in the RPG world. They are the king of the RPGs because of it. But in the last 10 years, there has been a few hits against the company. Fallout 76, some even say Fallout 4, but those people are dumb. Though, of course, people can go and argue that the game has been dumbed down through many of the mechanics which have been removed, and I wouldn't say that's exactly untrue. I mean, it is still an RPG. It is my favorite game of all time, and I will explain why as I go through the Skyrim part, though there will be a bit of a build-up to get there. Yes, so now it's considered an action RPG by many, and I'm not going to argue against that. I think that's more true, though there still are some attributes and a lot of skills and perks in the game. So it's not completely a dumbed-down RPG as many claimed 10 or 12 years ago. Skyrim is set to the north of Cyrodiil. It is a mountainous, cold land full of tall Nords who are currently undergoing a civil war with the Empire on one side and the Stormcloaks on the other. You are the Dragonborn, but you won't know it until after you kill your first dragon. Dragons haven't appeared for thousands of years, and most people don't even believe they exist anymore. On top of the old Empire of Tamriel being diminished in size and power, there is a new rival empire led by the Altmer, or High Elves, who call themselves the Aldmeri Dominion, which is actually the third Aldmeri Dominion, sort of like the Third Empire, that's still there. After Oblivion, it didn't just completely fall apart, though it lost a lot of its power, and 4 provinces? Maybe even 5. Really, all that's left is High Rock, Cyrodiil, a little... well, Morrowind's so damaged, but I guess Morrowind, and Skyrim. It's been over 200 years since the Oblivion, and a lot of history has taken place since then. You are now playing in the 4th era. Let's start with the game basics. Skyrim had 3 DLCs, Hearthfire, Dawnguard, and Dragonborn. For me personally, and I'm sure many others, the game feels much more alive than any other open-world RPG, at least so far up to the point the game came out in 2011. I would say even more so than Fallout 4, even though some mechanics in Fallout 4 were a further development of Skyrim. I think the setting hampered the lifelike feeling of Fallout 4 more than anything else, since it's supposed to represent a place recovering from a near end of the world devastation 210 years later. Again, like Oblivion, the graphics have improved, and animations are a little improved this time around. Faces still could have used a further improvement, the generic ones that came with the base game. However, at least they were acceptable this time around, with no distorted heads or other weird oddities that were in Oblivion. Some NPCs were, dare I say, actually attractive. This time all 3 bars regenerate, that is health, magicka, and stamina. Yes, it's no longer fatigue, it's stamina. Stamina works just like fatigue did before, and this time you can use frost spells to zap stamina from enemies, and they can do the same to you. This also slows down the target, making them sluggish. So let's get into what I actually love about Skyrim. I've written something like this on one of my channel community posts, but here it is in more detail. Walking from Helgen to Riverwood shows tall mountains, rivers that actually flow with fish jumping out of them that you can even catch. Rabbits, birds, foxes, and large deer running around, and none of them are hostile. It's like Bethesda actually tried to get an actual starting point for an ecosystem with animals fleshed out. In previous games, minus the deer, nearly everything would run out of the bushes to attack you. Yes, I know I went over the 4 creatures in Morrowind. Sometimes even the slaughterfish jump out of the bushes after you. Which doesn't sound right, but they did. In Riverwood, you can smith your own equipment and then improve them on the workbench or grindstone. You make leather that you loot, or that you skin from animals on the tanning rack. You can make leather strips from that. You can use that and leather to create items in the forge or anvil along with metal ingots. You can make jewelry or any item your character can wear. It's really quite comprehensive. In Fallout 4, I love the ability to modify your equipment, but you cannot create things out of pure materials. You need to find them first out in the world and then improve upon them, so long as you have the perk, materials, and required workbench. Though again with mods this isn't the case, but then with mods you can use a UFO to fly all over the Commonwealth, so this is why I will not discuss mods as part of what can be done, because you can do just about anything with them. Yeah, you can fly a UFO around. Alright, back to Skyrim. You can mine a vein for raw metal ore in mines, caverns, or if found out in the open, and take that ore to a smelter to make metal ingots. With metal ingots, you can make a finished product, and there are a lot of different kinds of metals in game. Some, like steel, require corundum and iron ore to make an ingot. You can even find gems and use them in making jewelry, or sell them, or collect them for a quest. And if you like smithing like I do, then steel will be your first upgrade from the basic iron starting equipment you get in Helgen. Now, with the anniversary edition of Skyrim from 2021, you can fish. I've done this a few times in my test runs. It's a really neat addition, and they coupled it with quests which I haven't tried out yet, but I use the fish I catch along with survival mode to keep my character from going hungry. Yes, they have a survival mode now. If enabled, cold, hunger, and sleep are all things you need to be mindful of. Carry food, a tent, and bedroll with you, dress warm, and you should be good. Diseases are more severe, and you can get food poisoning, such as eating uncooked fish. You need to sleep to level up, which isn't the case in Skyrim. And yes, fast travel is turned off, but I can take a carriage or boat around. There are no more Mages Guild teleport paths this time. These are just the basics, and it goes much further in depth than this. So back to the normal game, and why I like the added interactivity so much. You can chop wood and sell that wood to someone operating a mill, or use the wood to create campfires. Yes, with the campfire mod. I had to add that one in here since it's so important to me. Or even to use wood to create bows. Now if they just added a wood crafting system with different kinds of wood for bows, maybe the next game. Gone is the class system, which I never personally used, and I don't miss it. As I said for the last two games, I always just made my own. Now everyone is just their own nameless class, but you can still call yourself whatever you wish. The greatest thing removed from the game are your attributes. Not all of them, but most of them. Instead of strength, intelligence, willpower, agility, speed, endurance, personality, and luck, you now only have health, magicka, and stamina. Yes, I think everyone misses the older games for their attributes. People have called this a dumbed down for console RPG, or just an action RPG, mostly because of this change. But don't forget, they also called Oblivion the same thing back in 2006. Though in recent videos about Starfield, the upcoming Bethesda game set in a new IP, Todd Howard stated that they are bringing back attributes and character stats. He said something to the effect that they went a little too far removing those from their recent RPGs. For the first time, you can use food in the game other than for alchemy. You can make soups, cook the salmon you catch, and these both heal and satisfy your hunger if you have survival mode or one of the other modded survival mode types out there. Some of it can even keep you warm in the cold. With the Hearthfire DLC, you can build your own home. They only give you a couple of places in the game, but they require a fair bit of time. In-game resources and gold. While building them, you decide what you want in your home. Want an alchemy room or a smithing setup in the basement? It's up to you. But in the end, you can create a home that you would like. So this is also the first Bethesda open world game to have a permanent companion alongside you at all times. I know Fallout 3 had a couple companions which would accompany you here and there, but it wasn't until Skyrim where this was made a permanent thing. And there are many to have within the game, but for all you need to do something to get them to like you, or you earn them by becoming a Thane for one of the cities. You can also marry in this game, another first for Bethesda, which I do appreciate, though unless you want something other than a temporary stat boost, you'll have to resort to mods. No, I'm not showing any of that here. There are children for the first Elder Scrolls game, though the first Bethesda game to feature children was in Fallout 3. However, in my Oblivion game, I used Emma's Children of Oblivion mod just to add more life and realism to the game. I regret not using Emma's Children of Morrowind mod, which was a last-moment choice when putting the mods together for that game, due to it registering a bug when loading up Morrowind. I later learned how to remove those, but by then I had forgotten about Children of Morrowind mod until I used Emma's Children of Oblivion mod when I was throwing together my mods for Oblivion. With Hearthfire, you can adopt 2 children and become their father or mother, and you can make a bedroom for them while you decide what rooms to have in your home as you build it. Skills are improved by use still, and when you level up, you get one choice to increase one of your 3 attributes and one perk to choose from among many perk trees. From the Elder Scrolls Wiki, every time a level is gained, a point is granted to spend on a perk. However, points do not need to be used immediately. They can be saved for later use if the Dragonborn does not have the skill level required for that perk. Most perks will have certain requirements before they can be chosen. For instance, perks after the first point in Shield Wall require a block level of 20 or higher. High-end perks such as Shield Charge require a block level of 100. Still, prerequisites aside, most perks for a given skill depend upon a previously obtained perk, the exception being the starting perk that must be obtained first in order to obtain any other perks for that skill. The skills of Destruction, Restoration, Alteration, Heavy Armor, Sneak, Lockpicking, Pickpocket, and Speech all have a perk dependency structure that is similar to a rooted tree, hence the term perk tree. Some perks in a tree can only be obtained by looping around another path after reaching the end of the tree. An example of this is on the Smithing tree. The Daedric Smithing perk, which comes before the Dragon Armor perk, cannot be obtained from the left side of the tree, despite the Dragon Armor perk being visibly joined to the Glass Armor perk. The skill ranks are gone. No more Novice to Master with new perks, since perks are chosen directly now. Legendary Skills is a mechanic introduced in Skyrim with patch 1.9. Prior to this patch, the maximum level of a character was 81 without console commands, cheats. The patch allows the player to reset one or more skills, thereby the character can gain additional skill increases leading to level ups and more skill points that can be spent on perks. Once a skill has reached 100, it can be made legendary. This resets the skill back to level 15 and refunds any perk points that were spent in that skill tree. The dragon symbol commonly associated with the Imperial Legion will be displayed under the skill's name, indicating that it has been made legendary, and a number appears beside it to track how many times this has occurred. Legendary skills level up normally and have no added benefits compared with non-legendary skills. When a legendary skill is mastered, it can be made legendary again. This effectively removes any level caps since the player can continue to maximize, then reset skills an infinite number of times. It also allows them to level using only a small number of skills, so they can level while ignoring unwanted skills, or focus on easily leveled skills for faster level gain. Though, you need to be careful not to make a core combat skill legendary, not unless you want to make your life miserable in combat for quite a while. Good equipment and companions can help here though. So, we have horses back in the game. Thankfully, since I remember reading that originally, Bethesda wasn't planning on including them for Skyrim. Now that would have really upset a lot of people, and I can see why. Since Oblivion, I cannot imagine an Elder Scrolls game without them, especially since I like to use survival mode. Alright, what Skyrim has especially is atmosphere. Fairly good character voice acting, which compared to Oblivion that had both good and bad. And most of all, I think that there was something like over 70 voice actors in Skyrim, compared to what, less than 20 for Oblivion? At many points in the game, depending on where you are, several mountain ranges can be seen far off in the distance, and clouds can hang off them, giving a very realistic as well as a sense of scale of the land you are in. Overall, the forests, mountains, rivers, and wildlife can make this game feel really alive, at least for me. Bards sing in taverns, and you can request songs from them. Yes, there are a lot of mods around this to be found, a few that even allow you to be a bard. I have included one in my upcoming Skyrim game with the interesting NPC mod, which adds a lot more bards with actual singing skills. This time around, people's conversations actually make sense, but then it also comes with scripted conversations, not clips of lines thrown together to respond to various greetings or responses as it was in Oblivion. This is the first Elder Scrolls game to allow a form of dual wielding. You can use two one-handed weapons at the same time, or you can use magic in one hand and a weapon in the other, or both hands can have a spell, different spell even. They allow you to bash and charge with a shield as well, so long as you have the required perk for it. Skyrim allows critical hits to instantly slay a person or creature, and they even show what is a kill camera to see the action from a third-person perspective, or even to follow that arrow as it slams into your target, killing them. Sneak up on somebody with dual swords like I used to do, and you can sometimes critical hit them to see your swords ripping through their bodies in the third-person kill camera. Another addition is the shout ability. This is where the Dragonborn, that's you, the player in Skyrim, can learn shouts from ancient Norn writings on the wall, or learn it from others, the Greybeards. You can string these shouts together into one line to make them extra powerful, but this is rare for the shouts. Everyone who knows Skyrim is familiar with Fusro Da. Each word is the ancient dragon tongue, and is like an instant magical spell. Though shouts are used with a different key from magical spells, they can aid you directly in combat while you are in melee, even though people have criticized their lesser power compared to magic spells. I like them just fine, especially the speed shout, which propels you ahead quickly. Change is the way you pick locks. Now they have a new minigame that I actually find more fun and user-friendly. It's pretty much the same as the minigame in Fallout 4 for lockpicking, but in Skyrim, you still use brittle little lockpicks. Either way, I think a much-needed improvement over what was in Oblivion. The music. I find the music to be the best overall of any of the Bethesda games, though both Morrowind and Oblivion were pretty decent. I think my favorite Elder Scrolls song is Kind's Peace, which is the song that's playing right now. For the first time when you pick up ingredients for alchemy, the graphics of that plant or hanging animal corpse change, except for fish, but, you know, it's a work in progress. Every item in the game has the option to be zoomed in when in your inventory. You can spin it around however you like. This is helpful for solving puzzles that I will discuss shortly. More from the Elder Scrolls Wiki. The creation engine, which is Skyrim's game engine, allows the use of a new and improved Oblivion's Radiant AI system to govern characters throughout the game world. With the new system, developers may assign characters a wide variety of tasks and characteristics, giving each of them actions that complement his or her unique personality, and thus deepening player interaction with the characters of Skyrim. Characters now come in much more interesting varieties, from heavy drinkers to hard workers, layabouts to vigilant adventurers, and serve as a much greater part of the game than in Oblivion. Skyrim introduces the Radiant Story system, which governs quests and how they function. Radiant Story dynamically alters side quests based on the player's actions and tailors them to the player's abilities and progress within the game. As an example, the player might be sent off to a dungeon that has not been previously explored and face enemies that are defeated most effectively with that player's preferred combat style. It also randomly generates unique events and encounters, taking influence from Bethesda's previous game Fallout 3. This includes character interactions such as a courier, delivering quest missives or letters from significant figures or hired thugs seeking out and attacking the player. When talking to someone, you don't zoom in, locked out of your control like in Oblivion. You can even move around a little and continue the conversation. Though you as the player are not given more choices of things to say, and rumors are gone. There are no more unlimited gold on merchants, sort of like Morrowind again. However, all items are somewhat reasonably priced. You won't find rare equipment that sells for 50,000 gold. Instead, it will be much less and something more reasonable for a merchant to buy off of you. But Speechcraft is now a perk tree, and you improve it by convincing people, buying and selling. Mercantile is now part of the Speechcraft tree, where you get better prices and can invest up to 1,000 gold if you reach that perk. This, out of all the attributes removed and replaced, is the worst in my opinion. No longer does your character have a sense of charisma, just perks. And that's not too good for an RPG. It was handled much better in Fallout 4, which came out 4 years after Skyrim, but that game has its own issues with perks. And at least the charisma attribute is still there, and is used in a logical way throughout the game. In Skyrim, if personality was a man, it's like they took him and made him into a eunuch. On the other hand, enchanting has been completely changed, and unlike Speechcraft, is very well done. You take existing enchanted items to an enchanting altar and disenchant them. Doing that allows your character to learn how to create that enchantment, and you can then place that enchantment on non-enchanted equipment, as long as you have the soul gem for it. Personally, I love both smithing and enchanting in the game. Reach 100 in enchanting, and then you are able to choose a perk to enable you to place 2 enchantments on one piece of equipment. Alchemy is back again, of course, and this time you are required to use alchemy labs to brew potions, which is much more realistic than carrying around all the equipment with you. Though it's not as convenient as previous, at least you don't get weighed down with the equipment, and there are enough alchemy labs where I never felt this to be much of an issue. Every dungeon seems to have a theme, and a mini story, no matter if it's just a cave with 2 bears in it and a bunch of skeletons strewn about. It all feels designed well, at least for me, and even more so than in Oblivion. When you reach the end, or the boss of the dungeon, there is a shortcut to the exit, placed instead of backtracking all the way to the entrance you came in. Traps have been expanded in Skyrim, but use a lot of the same mechanics as they did in Oblivion. There are puzzle traps around, or just plain puzzles, that at least make you stop, look, and copy the symbols on them, and then recreate that set of symbols with the ones you can turn to open a gate. Get it wrong, and typically you are hit with a trap. Puzzles also come in the form of metallic claws you find throughout the game. They have a set of 3 symbols on them to open sealed doors. No traps will get you here, but they do require you to look at the item and match it with a symbol you can spin. The Civil War is an interesting mechanic and lore situation in the game. It's more like a guild that, if one is chosen, it cancels out your character from ever joining the other side. You can choose either Stormcloak or Empire. Then you can start waging war against the other side through quests, and liberate cities from the other side's control. In the end, well, I don't know, since I've never finished Skyrim, I've not finished the main story or the Civil War, but I definitely plan to do so with my upcoming Skyrim Let's Roleplay. One thing it also does, other than allows you to make real changes within the game world, is that you will come under attack by the opposing side when you meet them out in the game world. Join the Empire, and prepare to have Stormcloaks as your permanent enemy, and vice versa. There are a number of Imperial and Stormcloak camps spread throughout Skyrim, but there are a few random encounters one can have with them on the road. Add in a mod like Immersive Patrols, and you can get into a battle with a group of the other side, who now regularly patrol their territory. Or even more interesting, encounter a battle going on between both sides, and then join in. So one really nice addition to the game is the ability to sprint. Yes, there is now 3 modes of moving your legs. Walk, which is still slow, run, which is normal speed for me, and I assume everyone else, and now sprint, which makes you move fast, but burns stamina fairly fast too. Magic is always fun to use in the games, and like the previous games, you start out knowing how to use a basic heal for yourself and to cast a minor damage spell. However, Skyrim has been criticized for its magic being too weak. It's hard to go around just casting destruction spells and expecting your targets to melt, no matter how skilled you are or what spells you're using. The best spells either don't do enough damage, or you don't have the magicka points to continue casting until all your foes are dead. Again, there are mods to help with this, though I have yet to have explored them. They have removed the ability to create your own spells in Skyrim, and there is a set number of spells to be found and used throughout the game, which probably doesn't help with the spell power issue. This is something that Bethesda could have improved upon, but chose not to. Skyrim came with 3 expansions, or by now they are all called DLCs. I have really only played with one, called Hearthfire, where you can construct your own home and adopt children. Apparently it is the least of the 3. Dawnguard, I believe, was the first one according to the wiki, but I happen to remember Hearthfire coming out first. Oh, maybe I remember it wrong. So, Dawnguard is all about vampires. One of the strongest vampire clans in all of Tamriel are supposed to exist here in Skyrim, and the Dawnguard is a group that has been called forth to combat their evil wickedness. I know that vampire lore has greatly been expanded here, and you can choose to side with the Dawnguard or with the vampires, even becoming more than just a vampire in the game, but a vampire lord. That and the most popular NPC to marry came with this DLC, Serana, which I have expanded upon with the Serana Dialogue add-on mod, which uses the original voice actress to greatly expand on the character by adding in thousands of new lines and many new things you can do with her as a companion. I'll let your imagination run wild there, because mine kind of is. After Hearthfire and On Guard came the Dragonborn expansion, which is supposed to be quite the large addition to Skyrim, by far the largest, I believe, in any Bethesda expansion up until Fallout 4's Far Harbor. What do I know about the Dragonborn DLC since I have never set foot on the island of Solstheim that they introduced? Well, Morrowind is a wreck, especially with the Vardenfell pretty much being destroyed, but apparently by the year 201 of the 4th era, they are trying to resettle what is left of the island. Because Red Mountain exploded and destroyed anything left after Bar Dao, the meteor destroyed Vivec City, if you remember that meteor that was hanging in the air. Well, it didn't just drop to the ground. It came in full speed, like pause button was hit, and then when Vivec went and disappeared, that pause button turned to play, and apparently it's all underwater, that whole area. I forget the name of the bay now or whatever it is, but Vivec is completely gone. And because of that massive hit on Vardenfell, that's what caused Red Mountain to erupt. And all of Solstheim is covered in ash now? Or just the southern less snow and ice-covered area? Either way, that sounds like a lot of white and grey land to explore now. I don't even know if in reality you could tell the difference between whole areas covered in ash and whole areas covered in snow from the air, at least. Apparently you are not the first Dragonborn, and through the lore you would realize this partway through the game. But apparently the very first Dragonborn still lives and now wants you dead for some reason. I have no idea, so I'm not going to go and spoil it all for myself. All I know is that one of the Daedric princes is involved, Hermaeus Mora. One whom I think I know through only hearing about, because I don't think I've encountered a shrine or even a mention of this Daedric prince before the Dragonborn DLC. So I think that's a brand new Daedric prince. I know that you can apparently tame and ride your own dragon through the air as it flies with Dragonborn, which is something I've wanted to experience for almost 10 years now. And that is about all I know about those DLCs, and I really hope to experience in the year 2023 to 2024 all of it. Another thing I find that Skyrim has over Oblivion is stability. Massive stability compared to what I had to endure when Oblivion came out, and especially when I began my Let's Roleplay of it. Oh, Skyrim can still have bugs, even after how many patches and versions of the game have been out in the last 11 years. And it can still crash, especially when people throw on a couple hundred mods, but compared to Oblivion, it's like night and day. I even had someone recently leave me a comment on my channel asking me how I put on so many mods for Oblivion without the game crashing, since it's so unstable. How did I do it? A lot of patience, enduring all those crashes, that's how. So when I have seen the odd comment online over the years saying Skyrim is a bugged mess, I just have to laugh at them. Try doing what I did with Oblivion if you want to see a buggy mess. Let's go back in time when Oblivion came out. I tried for many years to get Oblivion working without it crashing every 20 minutes between its launch and when Skyrim came out, so from 2006 to 2011, and all without success. I eventually just gave up each time, and I grew very frustrated. When Skyrim came out, I just forgot about Oblivion, and that's why I didn't get very far in it to begin with. Skyrim is very stable compared to Oblivion, though again, it is a Bethesda game, and no Bethesda game is complete without bugs. So here's why I like Skyrim so much. I know I've mentioned this a couple times, but let's just get into it right now. And no, it's not stability compared to Oblivion, though that does help. It's not really the reason, but at least with Skyrim, I haven't grown frustrated due to the crashes and quit. The atmosphere, the beautiful mountains, the rivers, the wildlife, the feeling of being there more than any other previous Bethesda game is really, I guess, enchanting for me. Having a companion, getting married, listening to the bards, being able to craft and enchant my own equipment, enchant it in this new way, which is much better than the previous game's ways. Using survival mode, which I think came out in about 2016, but it's added to the game a lot for me. I love the perk system regardless of the removal of most attributes. I actually wish they had the old attributes married to the new perk system, and I think that that would be just about the most perfect stat RPG that you could have. The variety of voice actors, being able to sprint in and out of combat, and the general lore of the Nords. The variety of the cities and areas of the land. I think dungeons have been given an even better design than previous games, especially over Morrowind. With Skyrim, they just feel very satisfying for me to complete. They are no longer some random dungeon if there is no quest attached to it. They all have their own theme, and when done, they are labeled as complete on your game world map. The addition of shouts is something I like too. NPCs walk around doing work like farming, carrying water to the animal trough, cutting large logs in a water mill, or cutting wood. When you sit down in an inn, someone comes over to you to offer food and drink for you to buy. Kids chase each other or play with a dog and make funny comments that give me a chuckle. You can even play tag or hide and seek with the kids. This is in the base game, not a mod. And as I said, you can become a parent to some of them, as long as they are orphans, that is, since most children still have their parents. Guards comment on your skills as you walk by. Get a mod like Guard Dialogue Overhaul, and guards now give you respect for your skills and various deeds, instead of talking down to you half the time, even to the end of the game. The ability to change who rules the cities through the Civil War is also a big one for me. You win as the Imperials over Riften, and that leader is now deposed, and a relative who supported the Empire is now the new Jarl, which is the ruler of that hold. This is an area where choice is an outcome in the game world, one of the few Bethesda has done up to this point. Usually it's all on rails, or on that bus tour I keep mentioning, but here you get to choose which rail your train goes on. One thing you do find is, under the cover of all the current Nords and everyone else living in Skyrim, that there is a multi-level history there, much deeper than just the ancient and extinct Aelids of Cyrodiil who are long gone. First off, there is the ancient Nords who worshipped dragons and were under the control of dragon cults. Then there's the Falmer, hunched-over, blind, goblin-like creatures that are the mutated descendants of the ancient snow elves, who the Dwemer perverted and diminished before they left Mundus. And then on top of all that, you have the ancient Dwemer cities in Skyrim, all there to explore, which are either full of Falmer, especially the deeper ones, or still have their old animunculi functioning as guardians. You just get the feeling that there is a vast history the more you play the game that underlies everything, and is in good part why the dragons are back. Alduin is the main antagonist of the story for the base game, and he is literally here to kill you and end the world, as he believes it is his role to carry out, and that is why the gods created him. They call him Alduin the World Eater for a reason. I think all of that combined is why I love Skyrim more than any other game I've ever played. So, I don't mean to go over every single mechanic in each of these games, but I wanted to talk about most of it. If I missed something important, just let me know. For me, this was all very fascinating and worth pointing out, as my new Skyrim Let's Roleplay is coming very soon. Would I feel the same way with new additional mechanics in Starfield? I don't know, since I haven't played it yet, and at this point in the last few days of 2022, no one knows for sure when it will be out in 2023. The delay report on Twitter did state that the delay was to be in the first half of 2023, so I'm guessing we won't have that long to wait. I suppose I like the environment as much as anything else listed in Skyrim, and if Starfield is in space, who knows what they will be able to come up with. Every kind you can think of, I think, since there's supposed to be 1,000 worlds to explore. But I have a feeling that it won't be the same. However, I will keep an open mind until I get my hands on it. The space combat looks absolutely awesome. Jeremy Soule has done all of the Elder Scrolls games since Morrowind, and he has done a pretty good job if you ask me. As I said, Skyrim has some great music, and I really appreciate his work. Unfortunately, he is out from all future Bethesda games, as Einan Zur has taken over. Einan Zur has made some pretty good music for Fallout 4, I do like the main theme of the game, but I must say that I will miss Jeremy Soule's work on the Elder Scrolls 6 when it comes out in a few years, or 10 years from now, who knows, maybe I'll be 60 when it finally comes out, I'm 47 now. So, let's get to what happened to Jeremy Soule. I have really not heard many people even mention him, but I did go a few years ago to his Wikipedia page, and then I had to just revisit it and copy down what it wrote here. On Wikipedia, for Jeremy Soul's page, it states, Soul faced several controversies in the late 2010s, during which he primarily worked on indie titles. In 2015, Soul's direct song service was targeted by a class action lawsuit brought by members of the Guild Wars 2 community due to long wait times, with some users waiting 4 years for albums to arrive after purchase. Soul began accepting refunds for the unreleased symphony, The Northerner, in 2016. In January 2019, Soul indicated he was not involved with The Elder Scrolls VI. That August, he was accused of rape by game designer Natalie Lawhead. He was also accused of sexual harassment by vocalist Ariely Brighton. He denied the accusations. Materia Collective ended their work with Soul on his symphony, The Northerner, in response, and Soul's official social media pages were taken down. Soul's music distribution platform DirectSong and his Bandcamp page were also seemingly taken offline around this time. A 2022 article in Journal of Sound and Music in Games analyzed the accusations in the wider context of the Me Too movement and sexism in the games industry, commenting simply that not much has been heard of Soul since. And that is why we may never hear from Jeremy Soul again. One last point to consider here, because I've heard the guys from the channel Fudge Muppet that before Morrowind, Bethesda was almost done, as in financially bankrupt, and if Morrowind wasn't a success, they wouldn't exist to this day. Obviously, all companies are out there to make money, but in this particular case, I think maybe the rush from Morrowind to Oblivion was to continue the financial success that they had with Morrowind. It was all about bringing in more money. From 2002 to 2015, look at their schedule of released games. Morrowind in 2002, Oblivion in 2006, Fallout 3 in 2008, Skyrim in 2011, and lastly Fallout 4 in 2015. They were in a hurry to make money from 2002 to 2011, and damn the bugs or any great increase to modernize the graphics of the games. I think making Morrowind fully 3D in 2002 was a big step, and then the graphics, animation, updated game mechanics, and physics of Oblivion was a huge step for 2006, but then after Oblivion, their games only marginally improved graphics and animation-wise. Fudge Muppet is a great Elder Scrolls lore channel, by the way. These guys are 20 years younger than I am, but they taught me most of what I know about Elder Scrolls lore. Alright, so this is about the longest video I have ever made, and it is certainly the longest documentary type video I have ever attempted, taking me over a week to actually put it all together. I hope you enjoyed it and found it worthwhile. For me, it puts my favorite RPG universe into perspective and makes me appreciate the changes and improvements from game to game. Now I look forward to actually diving into my most favorite of all games, Skyrim. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.